productivity, winning strategies, and aligning employer-employee goals. If this sounds like something your business could use more of, then you've come to the right place. The Business Mechanic Show with your host, Vaughn Sigmund. Let Vaughn show you how to develop, improve, and jumpstart your business. So now, please welcome the host of The Business Mechanic, Vaughn Sigmund.
Welcome to the Business Mechanic Show. This is your host, Vaughn Sigmund, co-founder of Results Driven Leadership. Joining me today is my partner, Eric Van Doren, who is cooking right now. Not cooking as in the kitchen, but he's really doing well. And listen, if you haven't heard of Results Driven Leadership, we are the training and coaching organization that's just going to get you better. No matter whether you're just getting started in your management career or you've been running a business for years, we have the advice, we have the tools, we have the tips to help you stay ahead of the competition. And Eric is jumping into these podcasts with me, which it is so nice to have him as a partner. He and I are in such alignment on how we view all these things. He's a great new member of the team. So, Eric, why don't you talk to our fine audience about what we're going to talk about today?
The luxury of this is we live it. That's the cool part about what we do.
We were just talking about it, right?
Just talking about it. I think that's the key component of all this type of aspects. It's really how leaders unintentionally create roadblocks to their team's productivity. And you can almost say that again, just for fun, to let it sink in, how leaders unintentionally create roadblocks to their team's productivity. Wow, we've all done it, no doubt about it. But it's really usually leaders do it unintentionally. We do that stuff to try to find a way around something or do something, but it's really confusion happens when the priority is not clear, the guidelines are not set regarding either communication channels or allowing someone else take the lead or have the autonomy to do something to get the work done without constantly creating conflict with directions. It's a true measure of success is when the job is done and not necessarily how long it takes. You would agree with that, Vaughn?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Why don't you give us an example of that?
Yeah, it's good. It's interesting. We've had one recently in one of our little talks, powwows of when we go through and do training with different companies. It reminds me of a story about Sheila, not necessarily from Australia, but Sheila in accounting may be busy for a few hours each day, but if her work produces results, hey, guess what? You know what that means? Happy vendors and paid team members. Right, Vaughn? Is that how it works?
Yeah.
Then she'll have
everything's going good. Everything's good.
Everything's great. But then she'll have efficiency proved, her worth at business owners and managers will be spectacular, having to be prioritized 24 hours a day, investing effort into those activities. You got to love that. It drives meaningful progress towards the bigger goals. And think about it. If you aren't spending your time doing something valuable to advance your company's mission, then what the heck are you really doing? What are you working on? You got to ask yourself that. As a leader, it is so important to install in your staff, your group, your people, the notion of value responses more than creating value for your business. You agree with that, Val? Val, I got Val.
And so Val, okay, you're getting charged for that one. And I see a lot of business owners or even heads of businesses that are more interested in how quickly somebody responds to them than working on their business. They get so caught up in that, why haven't you messaged me? Why haven't you gotten this taken care of? Why aren't you moving at the speed of light whenever I tell you to jump? And you should be asking me how high rather than what are you doing as the head of this business or the manager of this team to create a better team or more value for the business? That's what you're saying.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Maybe hopefully I was clear enough on that. I think the key thing with all that stuff is really to illustrate more of this point, which I think you were mentioning. Another person, say Amy receives an email from me that was meant with silence. As time passes without a response, I don't know how that makes you feel, but I follow up again. Another email, and then another email. Guess what? Still nothing. Until finally she sends her a text. Guess what? No reply. All within the span of a little over an hour. This
What the
demonstrates.
hell could Amy be possibly doing that she's not responding to me?
I don't know. I know one thing she's not doing.
Yeah.
It ain't working,
Yeah.
which is not good. So listen, come to find out, Amy was head down tackling our most important clients challenge.
Oh, she was working.
She was working,
Son of a gun.
but my mind was not there. She was not working. With a small team, she had pulled it together. She proved invaluable to our business, prioritizing value over responsiveness to my quick, maybe not needs, but quick responses. And sometimes it's frustrating in our parts as leaders, but guess what? She was doing the frickin' right thing.
Yeah. And we make the assumption that they must be sitting around eating potato chips, gossiping about the latest episode of some TV show. They must be lazy and despondent, and nobody cares around here. Meantime, Amy's getting shit done for the most important client we have, and everything that client needs. It's like, whoops, that's one of those paradigm shifts, right?
Yeah, because the funny thing is, another story on the side of that is the person that responds sometimes as quick as lickety split. They're just sitting around sometimes. If they're the first person that responds every single time, we used to have a training thing. We used to say, my old boss would go, I'm going to send a note. I bet you this person, Jen's going to respond quick. I said, no, she's not. And guess what? He would send the note out. Boop. Jen respond first.
Yeah. Those are the people who aren't doing anything.
That's correct.
I talk to salespeople about the image of that, the message you're sending. If you're standing there just waiting on something to come through and you pounce on it, and in their mind, oh, I'm just giving great customer service. No, you're looking like you ain't got anything to do. You must not be very good at what you do. Let them wait.
It's true. So that's one of those things that sometimes it's just unintentional stuff that you create with that. I'm sure you've seen it too, Vaughn, times.
Yep, I have. And again, it's unintentional. We get caught up in our own mindsets and thoughts around priorities and responses. And depending on how we react, how we interact based on this lack of response or whatever, that creates some dysfunction with your team. And when you start incorporating dysfunction in your team, nothing good comes from that. Let me just talk about this real quick, Eric, because before I launch into some of the unintentional, is that how you say it? Unintended ways that people create problems for themselves, leaders create problems for themselves. I want to give everybody a special offer. Ooh. And it's for your personal development. Every time we talk about time management, everybody perks up. And this is all about time management, by the way. It's a byproduct of time management. It is an approach to time management, but this is time. There's only so much time that we have during the course of the day. We've got to be making the most of it. And for anybody, I put it in the show notes that wants a free download of our course workbook. It's not the course, it's the course workbook. It's titled Effective Time Management Strategies, and it also uses the Eisenhower quadrant, which, if you haven't heard of that, is one of the most valuable tools we teach. And it's taught worldwide by a lot of expert in time management. It gives you the Eisenhower quadrant. It walks you through how to use it. It gives you the 13 most common time management mistakes. It gives you topics around how to fix it, how to get more out of a day, how to time block, et cetera. It gives you a ton of information, mostly identifying ways to improve, getting those extra minutes and hours out of the course of the week to be more productive. So take advantage of it. The link is in the show notes. Go get it, download it, read it, use it. It's 20 something pages. It's pretty thick. So take advantage of it. So let's talk about some of the byproducts of being unclear, or some of the unintentional consequences that we create by not following our own protocols on communicating and letting people know what's expected of them. So when you as a manager or a leader are unclear about what you want, you may know it in your head, but you've got to turn that into words that others are going to understand. And if you can or you don't, that causes confusion. And if you've got some level of dysfunction or frustration around, nobody seems to get anything done around here, everything I tell people to do isn't getting done, it's so hard to hire good people these days, you need to go look in the mirror, because if the class is failing, or most of the class is failing, it may be you. And it's some of the things we're going to talk about today, because this happens when leaders don't clearly communicate their vision of what needs to get done, or their expectations of what good looks like, how long it should take, or when you need to change course, when you need to drop something, pick something else back up, or reprioritize something. You've got to be really clear. And your frustration comes from a poor level of clear communication, not because your people don't care, not because your people are lazy, not because it's impossible to hire good people today. It's because likely you're not being clear in your communication with all the elements of effective communication. And when you confuse your employees, they don't know exactly what's expected of them, they get frustrated. And when they're frustrated, they're unproductive. And again, it may be perfectly clear in your mind, but is it clear in theirs? Have you created a crystal clear set of expectations of who's going to do what by when? Is it specific? When do they need to get it done? Not today, what time today? That sort of thing. And if you're not doing all that, in addition to creating all this dysfunction and confusion, you can unintentionally create roadblocks to your team's productivity, because everybody's, I thought I was supposed to be doing, no, I thought no, you don't do it. And all this chatter's going on, and people are talking over each other, if you will. And sometimes it just paralyzes people because you've given unclear guidance. You've not shared all the information in a way that it was digestible, understood, repeated back to you, so that we know we're on the same page, we're aligned. We often just tell people what to do, and then we ask the classic question, any questions? Hell no, I don't have any questions. I'm going to go get stuff done. And they got all kinds of questions. Just don't expect your people to ask questions. What you should ask is, okay, what did we just decide on? Repeat that back to me. So understand that we're on the same page. That extra few seconds that you take to, hey, tell me what we just talked about. Repeat that back to me. It may come across in your mind as a little condescending, but if you do it every time, it becomes a vital behavior, best practice, just the way you communicate. And when you're doing that on a regular basis, you will be blown away at how many times people cannot repeat what they just heard and nodded to the first time. In fact, I'd say 75+% of the time, they will get it wrong. And that right there is what's creating the confusion, the dysfunction, and the lack of productivity, is clear communication.
I used to use a term all the time with that, just to keep things flowing, which is just répétez s'il vous plaît. The old French, repeat to me. So that was the line. Didn't sound so condescending, but it became just part of a conversation that they knew my language, and it made it fun. Hey, répétez s'il vous plaît. And they go, oh, okay. I got to tell you my, so it kept them engaged at the part. Something along those casual lingo sometimes works.
Make it fun. Smile when you do it, please.
Yeah.
And here's the other thing. And you and I were talking about this, I think, just last week. If your employees don't understand how to share information, effectively, efficiently, you're wasting time. You're wasting their time, they're wasting your time. Because again, back to efficient communication, there's got to be clear pathways along with set expectations around how we communicate around here, because this leads to frustration, again, lack of productivity, and it's really on the part of the employer that this comes from. And if they're trying to figure out how you like to communicate as their boss, or what these words mean, or I slacked you but 2 hours ago, Jesus, there's 200 slacks since then. So you've got to set up clear expectations around the communication channels that you use. Not only what channels to use regarding what, but what's the time responses. So when should we Slack? When should we email? When should we call? When should we text? When should we get our butts up out of the seat and go talk to somebody? And if we Slack, what's the company or your team's expectation? If you Slack me, should I respond immediately? Or if I Slack you, should you expect a response in an hour, 2 hours? Set the guidelines. It'd be however you want it. You can say that if it's an emergency, always text with a 911. And then we know it's an emergency and I got to respond immediately. Or anything that has got a day or two, we email. But in the email, we need to know when this has got to be accomplished. We got to set by Thursday at 3:00. We have to have this done. But any responses, okay, that can be a next day response or a 2-day response. That's a lower level sense of urgency, or however you want to set it up. But when do we Slack? When do I text? When do I call? When I get up? When do I and go talk to somebody? When do I email? And what's the response time? Because just like Eric was sharing early, you send an email or you send a message, nothing. Send another message, nothing. I've seen people get so worked up because somebody's not responding, because they should have the same sense of urgency on this minute issue that I do. And they may be selling, like Eric was saying, they may be making $1 million sale. They could be talking to your biggest client. They could be working on, you don't know what they're doing, but you're expecting them to be at your beck and call. Get real with yourself. Be careful with that. And you're super careful. You lay out really clear guidelines. And one of our favorites is, when is our GSD time, or get stuff done, maybe get shit done. Everybody needs to have clear, some of your leads. We need to understand when we're blocking time off to get stuff done. And what are the rules around that? If my GSD time is Wednesday between 10 and 11, don't come a knocking. Don't bother me unless the building's on fire. Then I want to know. So be thinking about those things. Make it really clear, very easily understood, with written rules and guidelines around how to use what channel and the time responses. Then everybody's on the same page and you'll save yourself a ton of grief. What about you, Eric? What are some other things that we ought to be talking about in unintentional roadblocks?
You said it so clearly. We've been in how many clients and how many folks that we work with. It seems almost unbelievable that that's not like A on the list of a meeting, or new people that come in. To me, it's everything. It will save your frustrations, because when leaders don't provide the clear guidance, it's really unclear of what to be expected between departments and when it should be CC'd. Who knows the information? You and I know this. We've had this many times on clients of ours. I didn't know that. I didn't see that. And it's just like, it's unbelievable to me. It's like, how's that happen? It's setting all those expectations, like you mentioned. Just get it done time. Oh my God. That happened to us in our careers, happens to us and our clients. And really, you'll likely see time wasted if you don't have those things really clear. Get it done by when and by whom. To use my accent. How's that? Pretty good?
That's lousy accent. You got to work on it.
Couldn't help myself.
Yeah.
What form of communication should you use if there's something rush priority? I think you mentioned the 911, the text thing. That's a good one, because I think text is really the most immediate thing how people communicate. Even the folks that are a little younger than us, they communicate mostly with text, and sometimes, and that's migrated into that Slack kind of motion, right? But text is really the first thing if you want something more immediate. I think obviously get up off your butt and walk around the corner if they're there. That's pretty immediate as well. So that's pretty important. What form of communication should be used if something is a low priority but important? I think for us, and to me, it's always nice to have a written email. To me, if it's important, it can come back, you can track back to it, you can follow up on it, you can keep everyone CC'd necessarily what's going on. I think that's super important. Really, as a leader, you might be doing everything in your power to lead your team towards productivity and success. That it's really where you're after. You're looking for clear vision. You need things to get done. Have all your resources available is important, and even communicate your expectations to your team members, like you mentioned, to know exactly what to do, when to do it, how to. And it's not just a one-time thing either. I think you don't just say it once. And it might be one of those things. Please pick that up. Please do that. Please listen. Eventually, it becomes part of your culture, and it becomes part of your language, which is in your culture. And I think that's really important. If something is not working the way you like it as the big boss, then you can change it. But make sure that you continue. Don't think you say it once and it happens. Once doesn't happen. That's what I know for a fact.
And you just said if you're the big boss, but even if you're the little boss, learn it when you're at beginning, learn it in the early stages, so you're not having to retrain yourself later.
Yeah, good point. I think the other piece I have here is, despite all your efforts, you might find your team is not meeting the productivity levels that you. And be fair and look yourself in the mirror. If this is the case, it might be worth exploring whether you unintentionally create roadblocks.
Yeah. And again, all of this is unintentional. You just don't know you're doing it, right?
You just don't know you're doing it.
You just don't know what you're doing. We don't know what we don't know sometimes because we've just been doing it. It's just become habitual.
It is.
So let's talk about the simplest, but the most often made mistakes. To me, I've got several of these I wrote down. Lack of clarity. We've talked about that. You impede your team's productivity by being unclear about the expectations, the goals, the objectives, the timelines. And again, you in your mind have a very clear understanding of what good looks like. You often, very often, if you've got dysfunction on your team, you're not doing a very good job of unpacking what's in your brain and turning it into words, turning it into a dialogue. Very often we follow a monologue approach to telling people what we need them to do. The more you can create a dialogue around your needs, an open communication where they can ask questions, it's safe. We're working on this as a team, not as a straight line from you to them, and then they start hopping around like their ass is on fire. You've got to be very clear, and the best way to get clear on things is to get collaboration, get buy-in, get a discussion going. And yes, to some of you listening to this sounds like a gigantic waste of time. You're probably listening to this because something else is wasting your time. And how's that working for you? I'm giving you a better way. So if you're like, for instance, if your team members are unclear about priorities, objectives, they're likely to be working on tasks that are not aligned with what you wanted them to do. They could be working on the thing that you told them last week when you need them to get this done for a reason. But if they haven't repeated that to you, if they haven't asked questions, they're very likely going to be misaligned and working on something that you didn't expect them to be working on. How many times have you walked out and you've seen somebody working on something that you told an hour ago to get something done, and they're working on something completely different, and you ask them, where's that thing that I asked you to do to get done? And they're like, oh, I was just going to finish this up first. Did you need me to do that now? You need that, right? I didn't realize. And you roll your eyes and you walk back and say, oh, people are so dumb around here. They're not dumb. They just don't understand what you needed them to do. So it creates a ton of wasted effort. We're going to talk about some other things that it creates, but it certainly decreased productivity. And if you always think of your assignments in a SMART format, specific, measurable, achievable, the person who's responsible, and most importantly, a specific timeline. If you give an assignment to somebody, you've got to tell them specifically by when. Don't just say today if you expect it by 2. Because somewhere in your noggin, you're thinking about a certain time that you need it. You may have said it, but they haven't said it back. So you're not sure whether they got it or not. Have them repeat your assignments to save yourself that frustration, but also keep it in a SMART format: specific, measurable, achievable, the person responsible, and time bound. And then many of you control freaks out there, many of you who don't trust your employees, your direct reports, maybe because of your own doing, you're being forced into micromanaging. And listen, it's important for leaders to stay involved, to monitor. Absolutely, you got to monitor progress. But when you take it too far, to the point where you're micromanaging, it becomes very counterproductive. Who likes to be micromanaged? Anybody? Raise your hands. Nobody. So again, that creates this sense of mistrust. It's a lack of autonomy. And let me talk about that for a minute. If all you do is tell them what to do, how to do it, when to do it exactly your way, and you do not allow them to make decisions and priorities themselves, all you're teaching them to do is to wait on you to come tell them what to do and how to do it. If you're taking work away from them because they didn't do it fast enough or they didn't do it right, let me just do it myself, you're creating your own worst nightmare when it comes to productivity. Don't do that.
No.
Please don't do that. They've got to be given the space to make decisions. And listen, if they make a mistake, they make a mistake. Correct it, learn from it, move on. The only way you're ever going to get them to take ownership is to give them that autonomy, independent discretion and decision-making. They may end up feeling much more motivated. They're likely to be much more motivated if you give them the ability and freedom to go do things their way, as long as it gets done on the right timeline. I'll get off of that one. You're not providing your team with the right resources or a lack of resources. Again, it's unintentional. I know you're trying to save some money. I've seen people run around the block 17 times over 50 or 60 bucks. We don't need to spend all that money to do this. Maybe you do. Think about it. How often can I use that? If that 50 bucks saves me 5,000 bucks or 500,000 bucks, spend the 50 bucks for the tool, the software, the proper paper, whatever it is. Give them the tools they need to do their job every day.
Amen.
Just having fresh, new, up-to-date stuff is huge. Outdated technology is the bane of everybody's existence, and trying to get by on the cheap with stuff that slows them down. I watched an architectural team one time working with 1960s, 70s software because the principal of the company, they're just changing things all the time. We can get by on this, to the point where I couldn't hire anybody who knew how to use that software. The software took forever to get a job done. Once I did the math with this gentleman, and he understood that you're paying these architects 60, 70, 80, $100,000 a year. That's 50 bucks, 40 bucks an hour. And it takes them 40 extra hours per month. You could buy a whole lot of software times the 8 architects you have working here. Now do the math. Don't let yourself look cheap invest in what's going to speed productivity and make your folks proud and happy with where they work.
Amen.
Just can't make chicken salad out of chicken poop. You just can't. Give them what they need. And you'll make up for whatever the cost is and save time, payroll, morale.
Oh,
They'll be much more engaged. And then, as we've gone on ad nauseum for communication, when we have a failure to effectively communicate, that's going to impact, it's going to impede your productivity. So, for instance, if important information is not shared with the entire team, all the team members, if you're unclear to all members of your team to make sure everybody understands perfectly, if it's unclear, if it's ambiguous, it will lead to misunderstanding and confusion. That's where you've got to create that dialogue, especially if the entire team is involved. You don't want that confusion. You don't want that dysfunction, because they're going to go out there and they're going to get started. And then there's going to be conversations around, I thought we were supposed to do this. No, I thought it was supposed to be this way. No, I thought this was more important. They're going to be out there spending time clarifying what it's going to take to please you, and or working on tasks that are not aligned because it was confusing to them as to when to start, when to end, what good look like, because they didn't have any say in the matter. They just nodded their head and said, okay, boss, I'm going to go do something. Don't do that. Sat in meetings where an important topic or project came up and we turned to somebody in the meeting and so, where are you on this? First time I've heard of it. We don't even tell everybody. Oh, that's right. You were out last Wednesday when I told everybody. If you told everybody and there's an important team member missing, you got to remember somehow to write it down and remind yourself to go tell that person when they do come back. Because it's news to me. I had no idea. And how many days has gone by? So, don't just tell a person. Make sure everybody that's involved knows. And if you skip somebody, get back to them. Or here's another one. Managers have assigned projects. And then another manager comes along and assigns the same person another project. And then somebody else comes by and says, well, why are you doing this? I told you to do that. Sally told me to do this. We're pulling them in different directions. Even your peers have to make sure if you share any of your employees, it's cross-functional at all, you two have to be on the same page as to what these assignments are. Don't step on each other. You've got to work in conjunction, clear understanding of who's doing what by when. If everybody doesn't understand your priorities, which are their priorities, that's dysfunction. That's impeding unintentionally their levels of product. What do you, when your team doesn't know how to make a decision on their own, they're not going to make decisions on their own. And the reason why they don't know how to make decisions on their own is often because you haven't given them the opportunity to make decisions on their own. You're making them weak. So we often get mad. I love this saying. We often get mad or frustrated with people for not doing what we didn't tell them to do. Let that sink in for a minute. We often get frustrated when people aren't doing what we didn't tell them to do. It happens all day in a lot of organizations, with a lot of leaders. And it's easily fixed if you just take the time to be clear. Effective communication. And then, so you've got to reward the behaviors that you desire. So when there is not a culture of recognition coming from you as their leader, if you're not giving them positive feedback, yeah, it's okay to check in on them, pat them on the back when you see it, be sincere, give them encouragement, be an encouraging leader. You're going to get productivity out of them. They're going to feel good about working for you. Those are motivators. But if you go out there and say, okay, good, you're doing your job. What else you want? You're doing your job. You get paid for that. God, I just want to wring people's necks when they say that. So understand that they work for you. They don't work for the company. People join companies. They leave bosses.
Yeah.
but they also are motivated by their boss. So give them a reason to be encouraged and motivated. Recognize and give them positive feedback when they're getting it done. Because if they feel like their work is not valued, it's not appreciated, it just creates a sense of disengagement. And with disengagement, you're going to get a lack of effort. And a lack of effort impacts your productivity. It all goes down the river. So just please pay attention to that. You've got to give regular feedback. And listen, I'm not saying coddle people. If they're doing it wrong, give them corrective direction, but don't make it discouraging. Always be encouraging. Oh, I appreciate what you're doing. Oh, you make this little mistake. I probably didn't tell you. Let's work on it together. Let's get it fixed. Let them know you have their back, that you're not beating them over the head with a stick all the time. No. Stomping on them, as Eric likes to say.
Nobody likes to be stomped.
Don't like to be stomped. Been a long time since I was stomped, and I do remember I didn't appreciate it. And then the other thing too, I've done a bunch of podcasts. We've got courses on this, on how to delegate and the value of delegating. Because when you're delegating tasks and responsibilities, it's making you more productive. It's an essential skill for you or any other leader. But when you're failing to delegate effectively, and you got to know how to do that. Again, we've got a course on that. Leads to a situation where they end up doing, these bosses end up doing everything themselves. They're overworked, they're stressed out, they're burnt out, they're frustrated. They're the hardest working person in the building. And eventually you're going to get mad about that. And that anger, that emotion feeds to everybody around you. Your team feeds off your emotions. Be careful what emotions you're feeding them. And the best way to relieve your stress, your frustration, is to delegate. Now, you don't just give anybody off the street a job to do. And again, that's why you have to take training on this. There's an exact method you have to follow to be a good delegator. But if you're not delegating well, you're hurting not only yourself because you're going to be overworked, but you're hurting them. Yeah. And the more you can light another candle on how to do something, well, two great things happen from that. One, you don't have to do it anymore all the time. Two, they feel really good because you trusted them to do something for them. You gave them something, some responsibility, and they feel really proud that you thought enough of them to give them that work to do. So not only are you helping yourself, you're helping them, you're helping their morale. And now I've got somebody else to do this. It's cross-functionally training your folks. You've got contingencies. If you've got too much to do and you've got 4 or 5 tasks that you train other members of your team to get done, you can get that off your plate and give it to them. It's so important for leaders to delegate their responsibilities to their team members. And everybody needs to be able to contribute and do some of your job for you. It's okay. You're not being lazy. You're being smart. So what else have I left out, Eric?
I would just say on top of that, what you just said about delegating, it allows the CEO or the leader of a team, if they are out on a vacation, sick, or anything else, it allows the business to continue to be productive. I was listening to you talk, and everything is so important. Every time that you say stuff, it's, yeah, I've seen that. Yeah. And it really comes down to a few big components. I think the biggest one, you could say it's an essential, but I think it's maybe the essential element, really, of any effective team is really the lack of trust. You don't have a lack of trust, you can destroy that. I was been doing a lot of interviewing as you've gone for a client of ours, and with those pieces and asking a good simple question, which is probably one of the most important questions, which is, hey, tell me more about the best boss you ever had. Right? You know that one?
My favorite question.
The other one, tell me about the worst boss you ever had. And that's been ringing in my head because I've been doing quite a few interviews and you saying this. And it is, if you want feedback for somebody that's doing an interview for a job, it's these things. It's these things. I heard it today from If I go back up, it's from micromanagement. You mentioned the poor communication. We were using old stuff. I'm not kidding. It is verbatim. This is not just made up stuff. This is
Eric,
real.
we see it every time we interview somebody. And it's the best boss is always the same person or described the same way.
Yes.
They're encouraging. They taught me. They supported me. They gave me good feedback. They held me accountable. That's the best boss.
Right.
And the worst boss is the person that didn't communicate well, kept me in the dark, really confusing me with direction, was highly emotional and frustrated all the time. Same two people.
Okay.
And okay, so whoever's listening right now, one, we appreciate it, but two, which one of those bosses are you? And you know which one you need to be. Go be that person. Nothing's stopping you from that.
So I just thought I had to add that in because it just pounced in my brain there.
So it's such a great example. Absolutely. Because again, impeding or impacting, creating a roadblock for productivity.
Yeah.
That's if I don't like you, if I don't respect you, if I don't trust you, you reduce productivity and you just don't realize what you're doing. I'm sorry. Go ahead. What else did you have?
No, I mean, I think there's the lack of trust can manifest in several ways, like we mentioned, the micromanaging piece, it just not delegating, not providing. You talked about it being autonomous. A gentleman today said, I left because of that reason, because of my boss. And I said, oof. He goes, I really liked what I was doing there and I was good at it. But after a while, it wasn't where I needed to be. And he's searching. And then you have another big one. It might be a touchy-feely thing for some, or a lack of touchy-feely. Lack of ethic is so important to be a leadership trait, especially in this day and age. The days of old are old on that aspect. You really have to feel what's going on with your people. The lack of empathy can create the big major roadblock to say, do not enter. And the productivity will go boof all the way down. You got to keep it open. You got to, because really, when really leaders cannot understand and connect with their team, it's just going to end up making decisions that are not in the team's best interests. You see it all the time. If a leader is insensitive to work-life balance, even if they may not believe in it, but your people do believe in it, you got to have that avenue. They're team members. Right?
And if you don't care, why should they care?
They won't care. You might end up setting up unrealistic deadlines. And guess what? Then the stress, and you know what happens there? The burnout. We love that burnout, and also impacts productivity because you don't have that person there anymore. The team members might end up focusing more on meeting deadlines rather than delivering real, pure quality work is what you want. Leads me to another thought, jumped in again, other things that talked about the best boss ever. They trained and developed. It is, and obviously for this act, it's the lack of training and development that didn't happen for this, the roadblocks, right? The leaders are responsible for ensuring their team members, their skills and knowledge to perform their roles effectively. And again, I had one person mention they threw me in the job and I didn't get any training on the aspect at all. I didn't know what I was doing. They went over it once, as we talked about one of the podcasts. That's 10%. I didn't get a chance to practice it. The guy said, and I was just listening to it. This stuff is real. It's real stuff that people are living with. And I know we're doing the podcast to the audience here, but just got to listen. However, leaders can sometimes fail to provide adequate training as you develop opportunities. It impacts productivity. Sometimes we can't even count that much. I know we have percentages out there, but it's probably more than the percentage that we're giving in some of these aspects because it is really difficult to tend on that.
Yeah, and training doesn't rely on them figuring it out.
No,
they got to be trained, and that takes time. So
does.
invest the time, plan and invest the time. And I've got some of my clients now that there's a day a week, an hour a week that they get everybody together for an hour and they train on something. Everybody's learning all the time. They cut their turnover way down by doing things like that, by the way. Anyway,
I'm glad you keep on adding that piece in because if you don't do it, like most times when training, they'll say, we don't have time for it. We don't have time. We want to develop people, but we got things to ensure that they're equipped to perform their roles effectively. You got to train and develop.
Which is an unintentional roadblock.
It is every time. And here's one of the biggest things that always jumps up. Didn't happen in the interviews today, but failure to recognize and address any conflicts going on. You can't walk by with blinders on because you know the conflicts are there. We're humans. We're not all the same by any stretch. And those conflicts arise on any team. Good teams, bad teams, okay teams. It's really the responsibility of the leader to recognize and address them. But leaders sometimes fail to recognize those conflicts.
Yeah. And we also, in fact, in the time management course or course book we're offering, it talks about that's one of the 13 biggest mistakes people make is not recognizing and drawing out those conflicts. Because if you've got somebody on your team you expected them to do and they ain't bought into it, they're pretty unlikely to do a very good job. I used to have team meetings with different teams of people, right? I had 3,000 employees at one point, and I'd visit a store and I get groups of people from different departments. We'll get together for 30 minutes, 45 minutes. And I'd always ask them, what are we doing that's stupid? Tell me what we're doing that's stupid. And by God, I found out a lot of things we did were stupid that I didn't even realize we were doing. But those were the conflicts. They were doing this all day saying, yeah, why do we do this? This is so stupid. But you never ask. You won't ever know, will you, Eric?
You won't. And I had a thing called honesty table. No conflict. I used to call it the honesty table. I come around and say, it's the same thing as stupid. Just tell me things that we need to improve on. I go, here's your honesty time. I'm not going to take any offense to any of this stuff. Just give it to me.
Give it to me.
You got 10 minutes to unleash.
Yeah.
And
or more.
Usually was more.
Yeah.
But I said 10 minutes.
The more you do it, the less it takes.
That's true.
Right?
That's right. And more communication and less that conflict. So the conflicts do address for the stupid stuff. I agree with you. And listen, we know the decreased collaboration, communication doesn't happen with that piece. The teamwork fails. What's wrong with my chemistry of my team, my culture? You got to recognize and address conflicts. That ultimately impacts the productivity of your company.
Yep.
Focus on resolve conflicts and delivering our results. I know it's time to wrap stuff up eventually. Vaughn, we could talk on this for could be a 17-hour thing.
But we got to get to drinking. That bourbon's not going to drink itself over there, but no. So let me wrap it up for us, Eric. Thank you very much. So goes without saying, you as a leader are absolutely critical in creating a productive and effective team. But many of you who are listening to this podcast are unintentionally creating roadblocks. And hopefully today we've uncovered some of those for you to go think about. And it's those roadblocks that you just don't realize that it's impacting the productivity of your team. You fail to give clarity. You're micromanaging. You're not giving them the resources they need, that you're poorly communicating, that you're not delegating, which allows them to practice and get better at things. They don't trust you. You don't trust them. They're not going to trust you. A lack of empathy. If you don't care, they're not going to. You've got to show you care. And then the failure to have an adequate ongoing training and development opportunities that serves in so many ways. That's one of the most important aspects of employment today people are looking for is growth, training, opportunities to get better. And then this last thing is so important that Erica was just talking about. You've got to understand when people are disagreeing with you, but there's a conflict, when people aren't bought in. Again, we've got a course on how to gain employee buy-in, how to get everybody on the same page. Just because you're the boss doesn't mean everybody's going to go get it done. You're managing minds and hearts, not just their heads and their hands. You've got to reflect on your leadership style, your approach, your practices. And hopefully during this podcast, you picked up on a couple things you can make some adjustments to lower the impediments that you're creating for productivity. And if you're creating an environment that fosters autonomy, trust, effective communication, recognition, you're supporting them, you can help your team members perform at far higher levels, but it takes you. They work for you. And the judge in all this is how well they're doing. If they're doing really well, then you're a really good boss and manager. If you're struggling, there's things that you need to go work on, my friend. And these tips we shared today are likely some of the things you need to go work on. So before we close out, just as a reminder, that special offer where you find Business Mechanic listeners, that free download of our entire course workbook, Effective Time Management Strategies. Go to the link in the show notes, download that for yourself. Want you to take advantage of that. So thanks for listening today. Visit our website, rdltraining.com. That's Romeo Delta Lima training.com. Look at all of our programs. Look at what we've got to help you become a better manager and leader. Follow us on LinkedIn, Results Driven Leadership on LinkedIn. Sign up for our weekly newsletter right there on our website. We share leadership tips and ideas, development topics every single week. There's no spam. We don't sell your name. You're not going to get spammed by us. We email about once a week unless you want us to do more. So thank you all for listening today. Eric, thank you for all your input. It's good to have you here. And we will talk to you all again in the very near future. Good day.
Good day.